My stepmother called me son for years, even though I never quite felt like one. It wasn't the word itself that was strange, it was the way she said it. Like it was a comfort to her, like it was the key to a door we both knew wasn't meant to be opened. She was the one who brought order to the house, who made sure everything ran smoothly, who kept the quiet tension at bay with her soft, steady voice. She was never the kind of woman who made demands or drew attention to herself, but somehow everything always centered around her. I watched her, always so composed, always so sure of the roles she played in our lives. Son, she would say when she handed me a plate of food, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. You're getting taller, I can hardly keep up. Thanks, Mom, I would reply, never meaning it, but always saying it because that was the word that made it all fit. The word that completed the illusion. It wasn't a secret that I had never fully accepted her as part of my life. She was a stranger in my home, a presence that loomed large and yet remained distant. A woman who wore kindness like armor. She had been my father's wife for years, but somehow, no matter how many sons she said, no matter how many dinners she prepared, how many late nights we shared watching television together, I still felt a gap between us. The gap widened the night it rained. It was late enough that my father had gone to bed already, leaving us to sit in the living room, just the two of us. The thunder had been low and constant for hours, rumbling in the distance until it had become a steady hum, shaking the windows as the storm crept closer. I was staring at the screen, but not really watching it. My mind was somewhere else, tangled in the knots I had been tying for years. I wanted to ask her something. I wasn't sure what exactly, something about her. Something about me, but the words never seemed to form. She was on the couch across from me, her knitting needles clicking quietly, the rhythm soothing against the backdrop of the storm. But even in the midst of her steady movements, I could sense something shifting in the air. Something unsaid that was about to be spoken. I could feel the storm that was building between us, though it had nothing to do with the weather outside. You're quiet tonight, she said after a long while, her voice soft. But I could hear the underlying tension in it. I shrugged, not knowing how to explain the way I felt. Just tired, I said. She didn't press, but she didn't let the silence linger either. There was something different in her gaze when she looked at me. Something that hadn't been there before. Something vulnerable that cracked the carefully curated mask she wore. Her eyes, usually so steady, now seemed uncertain, as though she wasn't sure how to bridge the distance between us. The rain began to pour, suddenly louder, hitting the windows with a force that startled me. The thunder rumbled again, much closer now, and she set her knitting aside, folding her hands in her lap. I didn't expect it to rain this hard, she said, looking out the window. The wind was howling outside, the trees bending under the weight of the storm. And I felt like I was drowning in the pressure of the silence. I've been thinking about something, she continued, her voice quieter now, the words coming slower, as if she were measuring them before she said them. I turned my gaze to her, unsure of where this conversation was heading, but feeling an inexplicable pull toward it, like the storm itself was pulling me in. I've always called you my son, you know, she said, her voice wavering just slightly. But there's something I've been hiding, something I've never told you. I didn't know what she meant by that, but my heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she might turn away, might retreat back into the distance we had always shared. But she didn't. Instead, she looked me in the eye, her expression softening. "You've always been more of a son to me than I ever let on," she said, her voice trembling now. "But I know I'm not the one you want. I know you never wanted me here." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. The words I had been choking on for so long, the questions I'd never asked, were suddenly right there, on the tip of my tongue. But it was too much. The storm outside had reached its peak, and the storm inside me had become too loud to ignore. "I never meant for you to feel like you had to pretend," she said, her eyes searching mine, as if waiting for me to understand something she hadn't said. "I thought I was doing the right thing, calling you son, pretending that it was enough. But I see now, it wasn't. And I've always known it." The words hung in the air between us, too heavy to lift. And the thunder cracked in the distance, louder than ever. The rain outside had turned from a gentle rhythm to a chaotic roar, but inside, everything was still. "I never wanted to be your mother," she said quietly, the confession slipping out like it was something she had been holding onto for far too long. "I never wanted to take your mother's place. But I thought if I could make you feel like you belonged, you wouldn't hate me for it." I could feel the weight of her words, and suddenly, everything became clearer. The distance, the walls, the way she had always tried so hard, but it had never been enough. It wasn't the title of mother that she had wanted, it was my acceptance. And all these years, she had been pretending to be something she wasn't. Something I hadn't asked her to be. For the first time, I understood what it was like for her, how lost she must have felt, trying to fit into a role that was never truly hers. And for the first time, I saw her not as my stepmother, but as a woman who had tried too hard to belong to a family that had never fully accepted her. "I never hated you," I said, my voice low, unsure of where these words were coming from. I didn't know how to be a part of this." She nodded slowly, the weight of years of silence settling between us. The rain was still falling outside, a heavy blanket that muffled the world, but in that moment, it felt like the storm inside us was finally over. She didn't call me son again after that night, not in the way she had before. The distance between us was no longer measured by the words we spoke, but by the quiet understanding that had passed between us. We didn't need to say much anymore. The truth, as it had always been, had finally found its way to the surface. And in the aftermath, there was no need for pretenses. The storm had passed, and we were left to find our way forward, together in the quiet. And for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the lies between us. I felt the possibility of something else, something new. It had been years since I'd realized the truth. The truth that my stepmother wasn't just playing a role, she had been playing me. At first, I had accepted the name she called me, son, without question, without hesitation. It was what I was supposed to do, wasn't it? She had been there when my father remarried, after all. It had seemed like the right thing to do. To accept her into my life and play along with the facade of a perfect family. But the longer I lived with her, the more the words felt like a mask. And for years, I wore that mask too. Pretending that I belonged in this family that she had so carefully constructed. My father, always so busy with his work, never saw the cracks in the walls she had built around him. He didn't see the way she was always just a little too perfect. Her kindness always just a little too rehearsed. But it wasn't until that night, the night the rain fell heavier than it ever had before, that the mask finally slipped. It was as though the storm outside had given us permission to speak the things we had never dared to say, to let the truth out. no matter how painful it would be. I didn't plan to confront her that night, but somehow, the words came out. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, an accusation. "Why did you call me son?" I asked, sitting across from her in the living room. The rain tapping against the windows like a warning. My voice trembled, but I didn't care anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. "Why did you say that for so long, even though you knew I wasn't?" She looked up from her knitting, the steady clicking of the needles stopping in midair. Her eyes darted to the window for a brief moment, as if the storm outside could somehow shield us from the truth. When she looked back at me, there was a flash of something I couldn't place, regret, maybe. Or guilt, but it was fleeting, gone before it could settle. "I thought it was what you needed," she said softly, her voice quieter than usual. "I thought, if I could make you believe it, if I could make you feel like part of this family, maybe it would make it easier. For both of us." I couldn't understand. "Easier?" I repeated, feeling the weight of the word. How? How could lying about it make anything easier? She set the knitting down, her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't want to be a stranger to you," she said. Her voice filled with something close to desperation. "I didn't want you to feel like you were the only one who didn't fit in. So, I pretended. I pretended to be your mother, your family. I thought that if I called you son, if I treated you like a son, maybe you would feel like one." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was a lie, a truth twisted and warped into something I could barely recognize. She had spent all these years convincing me, convincing herself, that we could be a family if we pretended hard enough. But pretending never worked. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped believing in the lie. "You were a stranger," I said, my voice tight. "You are a stranger. I never asked you to be my mother. I didn't need you to be. I just needed you to be real." Her eyes flickered, and for a moment, she looked like she might crumble. Like the weight of her own words might finally be too much to bear. "I didn't know how to be real with you," she whispered. "I didn't know how to be anything other than what I thought you wanted me to be." And for the first time, I saw her. Not as the woman who had tried so hard to be everything for my father, for me, but as someone who had been lost herself. Someone who had spent so long trying to create the perfect version of family that she had forgotten what it meant to be honest with anyone, including herself. "You were never the mother I needed," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You were just someone who filled the space she left behind. Pretending to be something you weren't." The storm outside intensified, the rain pounding against the windows with an almost violent force. I stood up, the room feeling too small, the walls pressing in on me. I wasn't sure what I wanted from her anymore. Apologies, explanations, some semblance of closure, but I knew I couldn't stay in that room with the truth finally hanging between us. "I never wanted to be part of the lie," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "But you taught me how to live in it. You taught me how to lie just like you. And now I don't know how to stop." She didn't say anything, but I could see it in her eyes, the regret, the guilt. The realization that she had not just lied to me, but had woven a whole world of half-truths around all of us. Until the fabric of everything had started to fray. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered, and in that moment, I realized I didn't know either. The lie had been so deep, so entrenched in our lives, that I wasn't sure if anything could ever make it right. I walked away from her, leaving the storm outside to rage as it would. It felt like the storm inside me had reached its peak. Too, like everything had come to a head and there was no going back. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't look back at her. There was nothing left to say. The damage had been done. And in the silence that followed, I felt the weight of the truth settle into my chest. It was no longer about pretending. It was no longer about lying. It was about what came next, what we would do with the wreckage of everything we had built on falsehoods. I wasn't sure if we could rebuild. But I knew, without a doubt, that I would never lie like that again. The days that followed felt like the aftermath of a storm. The air was thick with things left unsaid, and the silence in the house was unbearable. As if every room held its breath, waiting for something to break. I had expected my stepmother to avoid me after that night, to retreat back into her role as the perfect wife, the perfect mother figure she had so carefully constructed. But she didn't. She stayed, silent, watching me, waiting for me to say something more. But I didn't know what to say. How could I? What could I possibly say to someone who had spent so long building walls around herself? Walls made of lies, pretending to be something she wasn't. Pretending to be someone I needed her to be? It was hard to look at her without seeing the cracks. The way her lips trembled when she spoke. The way her hands fidgeted with the edge of her apron. Like she was trying to find a way to hold it all together. I had always seen her as someone who was strong, composed, in control. But now, she seemed fragile, like she was unraveling beneath the weight of everything she had hidden. My father, of course, remained oblivious. He didn't notice the subtle tension between us, the way the house had shifted. He went about his day as if nothing had changed, as if the truth hadn't been exposed. As if the walls of our home were still the same. But I couldn't pretend. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't know how to go back to the way things had been before the storm. One evening, after dinner, when my father had gone to bed, I found my stepmother sitting by the window, staring out at the darkened yard. The rain had started again, falling softly against the glass. She hadn't noticed me enter the room until I stood in front of her. "I know you're still angry," she said quietly, not looking at me. Her voice was soft, but there was a strain in it that I hadn't heard before. "I'm not angry," I said, though I could feel the heat of it still lingering. Buried deep inside. "I just don't know what to do with all this." She looked up then, her eyes red-rimmed and tired. But there was a kind of resignation in them now, something that hadn't been there before. "I never wanted you to find out like this. I never wanted to hurt you, but I thought if I kept everything hidden, I thought it would be easier. For all of us." "You thought lying would make it easier?" I asked, my voice edged with disbelief. "How could you think that?" She dropped her gaze, her hands twisting in her lap. "I thought if I played the part, if I pretended to be your mother, you wouldn't feel the loss. You wouldn't see what was really happening." I stood there, my chest tight with a mix of anger and sadness. "You lied about everything. About her. About the past. About what you and Dad. What you both did." "I never wanted to hurt him either," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want him to know. I didn't want to be the one to break him. And I thought if I could just pretend, maybe it wouldn't matter. Maybe it wouldn't change everything." "But it did," I whispered, the weight of her words sinking in. "It changed everything." She nodded, her lips trembling. "I know. And I wish I could take it all back. I wish I had told him the truth from the beginning, but it's too late for that now. It's all too late." I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? The lies, the secrets, the years of pretending, it had all come to this. She wasn't the woman I had thought she was. And I wasn't the person I had thought I could be in this house. Everything we had built, everything we had hidden, had come crumbling down. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, the words coming out softer than I intended. I don't know if I can forgive either of you. She nodded again, her face crumpling with the weight of my words. The truth that had been left unspoken for too long. I don't expect you to. Not now. Not ever. But I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know why I did what I did. I stood there for a long moment, looking at her, trying to understand. Trying to make sense of everything she had just told me. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had ruined. But somehow, in that moment, I couldn't. She wasn't the villain in the story, and neither was my father. They were just two people who had tried, and failed, to hold it all together. But in the end, they were still just people. Broken. Flawed. And so was I. I'm not sure what happens now, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. I don't know what we're supposed to do next. She didn't have an answer. She couldn't. Neither of us did. But as I turned and walked out of the room, I felt something shift. The lies had been exposed, and maybe that was the hardest part of all. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally found its way into the light. And there was no going back. The house was silent, save for the sound of the rain. And I realized then that it would never be the same again. We couldn't unsee the truth, but maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward from it. But I wasn't sure how we'd get there. Not yet. Not today. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling. The kind of thing you don't notice at first, small shifts. Quiet moments where the weight of everything that had been unsaid began to settle in. The house was never quite as quiet as it had been before the storm. My father was still moving through his days, oblivious as ever. But my stepmother and I had found a strange, unspoken distance between us. She no longer called me son with that same ease, the way she used to. As though it was as natural as breathing. Instead, the word felt awkward, foreign, like something she had forgotten how to say. The tension between us was thick, like the storm had somehow stayed inside the house, clouding everything around us. I kept my distance, too, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to even approach her. We had danced around the truth for so long, pretending everything was fine. Pretending the cracks weren't there. But now, everything felt different, like the foundation beneath us had been shattered. And we were left trying to pick up the pieces. It was a Wednesday evening when it happened, the night it rained again, harder than before. I had been sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, trying to drown out the thoughts that had been swirling in my head. I could hear the rain beating against the windows, the steady rhythm of it almost soothing. Like a lullaby, but there was no peace in it this time. The weight of everything we had been avoiding hung in the air, suffocating in its silence. Then, I heard her. My stepmother's voice, soft but strained, calling my name from the hallway. Can we talk? I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't heard that tone in her voice before, this softness. This vulnerability. It was as if she had come to some realization. Like she knew that we couldn't keep pretending anymore. I stood up slowly, the words I wanted to say caught in my throat. I followed her into the kitchen, where she was standing by the sink. Her hands still wet from doing dishes. The rain had picked up, the sound louder now, almost like a constant roar. It felt like the world outside was collapsing. Like it was mirroring everything that had been left unsaid inside the house. I've been thinking, she began, her voice trembling, about what you said that night. About everything. She paused, and I could see the way her eyes avoided mine. Like she wasn't sure how to look at me anymore. And I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. There was nothing left to fix. Nothing that could undo the years of pretending. All I could think about was how long we had been lying to ourselves. How we had allowed the illusion of a family to continue even when we knew it wasn't real. Why did you do it? I asked quietly, my voice almost lost in the noise of the storm outside. Why lie to me? Why lie to Dad? Her shoulders slumped and she looked down at her hands. Because I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. I thought if I could just pretend. Pretend we were all a family. Maybe it would make the truth less painful. Maybe it would make it easier for you to accept me. By lying? I asked, the bitterness in my voice rising again. By hiding everything from me? From Dad? She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Yes. I thought I could protect you from the truth, but all I did was build a wall. A wall between us. I stared at her, my mind racing with everything she had just said. She had spent years hiding the truth, trying to keep us all in this false world. Trying to make everything seem perfect when it never was. And the worst part was that I had been complicit in it too. I had allowed it to happen, allowed myself to believe in something that wasn't real. I don't know how to fix this, she said softly, her voice barely audible over the rain. I don't know if I can. You can't, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. None of us can. The truth has already broken everything. She didn't say anything in response. Instead, she just stood there, her body shaking, her head bowed. The silence stretched between us, suffocating, until the storm outside seemed to finally quiet. As if it had heard our conversation and had decided to let us have this moment. But it wasn't a moment of understanding. It wasn't a moment of reconciliation. It was a moment of realization that we were both trapped in the consequences of choices we couldn't undo. I don't know how to forgive you, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. Her face crumpled, the weight of my words sinking in. I know, she whispered. I never expected you to. But I hope, one day, you can understand why I did it. I shook my head, the bitterness in my chest rising again. I don't think I ever will. The rain had stopped, and for a moment, the house was silent. She stood there, still, her shoulders hunched with the weight of everything we had said and unsaid. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to move forward from this. There was no going back. The truth had been spoken, but it had changed nothing. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. Still trying to hold on to the illusion that she had created for so long. The walls of the house, once filled with the sounds of family, now felt hollow. And in the emptiness, I realized that I had learned something about myself. Something I hadn't known before. I had learned how to stop pretending. I had learned how to see the truth, even when it was painful. But the hardest lesson was realizing that sometimes the truth isn't enough to fix what's been broken. I spent the next few days in a kind of fog. The storm that had erupted between my stepmother and me still hanging in the air, casting a shadow over everything. The house had never felt so empty. My father, as usual, was wrapped up in his work, never noticing the distance that had grown between us. He couldn't, he wouldn't. He was still too consumed by the illusion of family, by the lie that had kept us all tethered to the past. I couldn't live like that anymore. The weight of the truth, of the things we had ignored for so long, was crushing me. I wanted to scream at him, tell him everything, but I couldn't. I couldn't break him like that. But I also couldn't keep pretending. It was late one evening when I decided I had to confront it again. I couldn't let this silence linger, not when everything felt so broken. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when you're waiting for the next wave to hit. I found my stepmother in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring out the window at the empty street. Her back was straight, but there was something about her posture that suggested she was no longer sure of her place in this house, in this family. "You're still here," I said, my voice flat. She turned to face me, her eyes weary, her face drawn. She didn't speak right away, as though she was trying to gather her thoughts. For a long moment, neither of us moved. It was like we were both waiting for something, but neither of us knew what it was. "I didn't know how to make this right," she said finally, her voice small, almost apologetic. "I thought if I kept it all buried, if I kept pretending, maybe things would go back to the way they were. But I see now. I see that I've made everything worse." I didn't respond right away, the words stuck in my throat. I didn't know what I wanted her to say, what I needed her to say. But I couldn't let this go on. Not anymore. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice tight, almost choking on the words. "Do you even love him?" The question hung in the air between us, thick and painful. I could see the flicker of something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or regret, but she didn't answer. She just looked down at her hands, her fingers twitching nervously. "I thought I did," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But love doesn't fix everything. It doesn't make the lies go away." It wasn't the answer I was looking for, but it was the truth. The truth I had been searching for, even though I didn't want to hear it. Love, in her eyes, had always been conditional. It had always been tied to the image of a perfect family, a family that didn't exist. "And what about me?" I asked, the bitterness creeping into my voice. "What was I to you? Just a part of the illusion? Another lie you needed to keep everything together?" She flinched at my words but didn't look away. "You were never a lie," she said softly. "But I didn't know how to love you the way you needed me to. I didn't know how to be the mother you wanted." "I didn't want a mother," I said, the words sharper than I intended. "I just wanted you to be real. I wanted you to be honest with me. With us." She sat there in silence, her shoulders hunched, like the weight of everything we had been through was finally pressing down on her. I wanted to feel something for her, some semblance of sympathy, but I couldn't. Not after everything that had happened, after all the lies she had told. After all the years we had spent pretending. "You're still my family, whether you believe it or not," she said quietly, her voice wavering. "And I know I've ruined that. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can." "You can't," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "It's too late for that." Her face crumpled then, the tears she had been holding back finally falling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to hurt him. I wanted to say something, something that would make it better. Something that would fix the years of damage she had caused. But I couldn't. There was no fixing it. The lies had already broken us. And the truth had only made the cracks more visible. There was no going back from here. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said, my voice quieter now, more resigned than angry. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you've done." She nodded, her face pale, her expression empty. "I understand," she whispered. I didn't know if I meant it when I said it, but as I stood up and walked away, I realized that forgiveness didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that we couldn't go back. We couldn't undo the lies, couldn't fix the years we had wasted pretending. The storm had passed, but the damage had already been done. And now, all that was left was the wreckage. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing for certain. The family I had once known was gone, and in its place, all that remained was the truth, raw and unyielding. And that truth was something none of us could escape.